Well, thank you very much for that absolutely wonderful welcome, and it's an absolute privilege to be here today. It's not my first time at the USLS, and it's not even my first time in this hall. As was mentioned before, it was actually 6 years ago that I sat amongst you. I think I sat just over there in the hall, actually, if I can remember correctly, and it was just the most incredible experience. Now, a lot has changed in the last 6 years, and I'm going to go through what I've been able to do since then, and also some of the changes that have happened in the world in the last 6 years. But I can say this, the lunch that we just had downstairs, it has not changed. Now, it hasn't. Even the tablecloths are exactly the same. The massaman curry is still the best dish on the menu, if I can say that. But a lot else has changed. My first time here, I was 20 years of age. I was a delegate, just like you. I'm from Townsville in Queensland, in Australia. And when I was a delegate, you know, it was interesting. Mr. Kim referred to Bangkok earlier as tempting. Well, let me tell you, it was very tempting for me back then. I certainly got a good look around Bangkok, and what a fantastic city it is. But while I was there, I had an idea, I had a dream, and that's what I look forward to sharing with you today. 2 years after that, I had the opportunity to return to the USLS as a panelist in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. What an amazing experience that was. And when I looked at the 2023 run sheet, I didn't get a go. I wasn't on it. And I thought, oh, well, that's okay. Got something pretty important happening in August 2023, so I probably can't make it anyway. I'm getting married to this beautiful lady in the front there, Chloe, and she won't stand up. She doesn't like attention, but give her a round. But it's a funny story, you know, about how things come along in life that you just don't expect. They grab hold of your life and they take you to places that you never thought you would go. And I have to admit that whilst I was cleaning up my front yard, I was not dressed like this at all. And I'm pulling trees down and putting rubbish in the trailer and things like that, when suddenly my phone lights up and a Mr. Kim is calling me. And I thought, hey, this is odd. Oh, I better take it. And he said, Jack, one of my speakers has pulled out. I need you to come to Bangkok. I know you're getting married, but can you do it? And my first answer was, you've got to be kidding. How on earth am I going to be able to convince this beautiful woman to go via Bangkok to our wedding in New Zealand? But we're here, so we got that done. But a massive thank you to Mr. Kim and Janice and the whole team at Humanitarian Affairs Asia. It's a place that's very, very warm in my heart, and I look forward to writing another chapter today. Now, we had the last-minute preparations to come to Bangkok, last-minute things. You know, don't forget your SDG pin, get the suitcase sorted, all these sorts of things. But one thing that I didn't have to think very hard about, one item that I was never ever going to forget on my journey here or anywhere else in the world, or even when I go to work each day, is this little thing up on the stage right now. Now, for those that can't see on this side of the room, there's a laptop there, my laptop, and I would never have forgotten it. Because to me, it's indispensable to my life and everything that I do with my time on earth. So, it's time to put your hands up. We're going to play one of those games. I apologise. Hands up, who in the room owns one of these? And if you haven't got your hand up, put your hand up. That's it. We've got 100%. Now, hang on. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Now, keep them up if you use one of these every single day, at least every single working day. Now, we have a room full of future leaders and scholars, so I'm going to assume that most of you use your device for study or work. If you don't do that, put your hands down. Now, keep your hands up if you use your laptop to apply for great opportunities such as the USLS. Who applied for the USLS on their laptop? Wow, there's still a lot of hands up. Now, this is where most of you can give your arms a rest. How many of you think that you could continue to study effectively, maintain that GPA, complete assignments, submit applications to exciting opportunities like the USLS, work remotely, and meet people from all over the world without having access to one of these? Now, here's an interesting one too. I was looking around the room before. Today I'm going to talk to you about digital exclusion. Now, I'm watching there's still a few people on their phones right now, so this is going to help prove my point. Do you think that you could go through the rest of my speech or the rest of today without using your phone? You reckon? All right. Well, let's all do it. Put your phones down in solidarity with the 3.4 billion people on our planet who experience digital inequality. 3.4 billion people, they couldn't put their hands up before. 3.4 billion people denied access to the digital world, which we all take for granted. That's over 1/3 of humanity experiencing some form of digital inequality. Now, I'll probably introduce myself a bit later on, but I'm sure the accent and MC's lovely introduction would have given it away that I'm an Australian. I'm incredibly lucky to be from the third most developed country of 192 in the world, according to the Human Development Index. Now, it might shock you to learn that even in that development context, 1 million Australian students do not own a laptop at home. Hands up who's an Australian in the room. Wow. I wasn't expecting that one. Now you can put your hands down. I don't know about you, but it disappoints me that given that we're one of the most highly developed countries and most fortunate societies on this planet, that over a quarter of our school-age students do not have the tools needed to learn, dream, and achieve in the digital age today. Now for them, and 1 billion other students around the world, learning quite simply stopped during the pandemic. And even as the pandemic has subsided, the expectation in Australia and many other developed countries is that students will have a laptop to learn on just as they have books, pencil cases, and a backpack. Those students who cannot afford a laptop are immediately disadvantaged and marginalised. Now, in Australia's closest neighbour, Papua New Guinea. Now, we have one delegate from Papua New Guinea. Can she put her hand up? Fantastic. But Papua New Guinea sits on the other side of the development spectrum. It places 158th on the Human Development Index. 94% of its students will not use a computer when they go to school today, tomorrow, or the day after. 94% of their students. And what's worse, 88% of young Papua New Guineans that are younger than me, have never used a computer. And I've personally met many of 2 million young Papua New Guineans who've never even seen one. For them, the closest that they've gotten to a digital lesson is learning to type on a printed out paper keyboard. For them, using a computer, browsing articles, learning about new places, finding answers out at the touch of a button, and typing their name remains a dream. For them, their education is not preparing them for the realities of the future with which they have a right to belong. For them, writing a CV and a cover letter to submit to one of the biggest companies in the country is still a pen and paper task. Now, this is me many years ago, not at the 2017 USLS, a little bit before that. But I grew up very happy. You might not look it there, but I certainly grew up very happy because I grew up in the relative privilege of regional Australia. I first saw and used a computer in 2003, in my first year of primary schools. But look, let's not get too excited because it certainly wasn't the experience that I enjoy every single day using one of these. No. It was a big box, maybe about that big. It had cables coming in and out of it, and it actually sounded like a jet aircraft when it booted up. All these chords and all these noises that it made, it was quite ridiculous, to be honest. And, you know, I was even thinking about how something as simple as downloading the USLS application form could have taken me an hour. I mean, how did we live back then? I really don't know. They were impossible to fix too. And you can just imagine this little gremlin up there on the screen. Imagine how annoyed his mother was when she came home one day from work and found that I had rearranged all the keys off of a desktop keyboard and put them somewhere else. I thought I knew better. Now, my beautiful wife-to-be, Chloe, who is in the audience today, grew up nearby in a household of 5 school-aged children. So she would remember that back in those ancient times, you used to have to dial up the internet. And if one person or one sibling in that household even dared to pick up the landline phone, the internet would quite simply crash. It really was the dark ages. Jokes aside, though, I crossed the digital divide in 2003. I may not look all that phased in that smug grade 1 school portrait, but it was a big deal looking back at it. In 2003, I had access to a computer. However archaic it may have been, I had access to the internet, where the greatest collections of knowledge that humanity has ever concocted can be found. Looking back now, I treasured that access. I recall spending hours and hours as a little boy and then a teenager learning about the world around me and all the history which came before me. 20 years on, I've never lost that access. But 20 years on, billions of people have never even experienced it. It is this tragedy which we will explore today, the digital divide, one of the greatest yet least understood development challenges of our century. A gaping chasm which keeps people from the remarkable opportunities and potential of the digital world. Now, a lot has changed since 2003, least of all me and my haircut. And aside from a sharp decline in the quality of music, the world has also experienced 2 decades of unrelenting and extraordinary technological innovation. Hands up quickly. Now, you've got to own up to this. Hands up quickly who's a serial TikToker. Put your hands up. What about Instagram? Come on, Snapchat. Who uses these things every day? Who sends pictures to their friends on their phone? Well, get this. Get this, right? And I was doing a bit of research before. I couldn't believe it. I hope you put your hand up there too, Chloe. In 2003, you could not send an image via a mobile phone in 2003. In the next 24 hours, 170 million images will be transmitted across the world, mainly, it seems, by some of us here in the room. Now, who in the room was not born in 2003? This one I'm keen. Wow. Okay, great way to make me feel good about myself. Okay, this may shock you, but in 2003, the ancient times when dinosaurs and Romans cruised around the earth, drivers used a big, thick book called a street directory almost daily to find their way around. So if you didn't know where you were going, you used to reach into the glove box of your car and flick through there and find the page, and some people were better at it than others. Google Maps, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Zoom, Tinder, Uber, and the iPhone were either in their infancy or they simply did not exist yet. Every morning, people would read these big broadsheet newspapers to get their news. They studied physical maps to find their way to get to new places. They read these giant encyclopedias just to get to know things and to complete their assignments. And they poured through phone books to find services, order food, or buy products. And you can see up there just that little yellow thing, the yellow pages. That was Uber Eats back in 2003. In fact, my mum, she even kept a little black contacts book, right, in her little shelf until 2009. It's crazy. But nowadays, we work, we study, we meet, we shop, we learn, and we entertain ourselves on this incredible platform called the digital world, which we access using a device that I hope none of you are touching because you just said you weren't going to use it before the end of my speech. But it has more possibilities, more capabilities than anything our species has ever invented, and it sits in your pocket. In your pocket. Now, the average person who owns a smartphone spends a quarter of their lives on it. This transformation up on the screen here has all taken place within my lifetime. I'm almost the same age as all of you. I'm 26. So that is really saying something. But the thing is that these technological advancements, yeah, sure, they've been staggering for those of us that have enjoyed it. But they've also been staggeringly irrelevant to those who haven't. All of these innovations which have served to make our lives easier, simpler, or faster mean nothing to the children living in remote parts of the Philippines, for example, without digital access. They add nothing of value to the kids in Papua New Guinea who I serve, who walk hours to go to school in the hope of a better future. Because for all intents and purposes, these tools and this world does not exist to them. And whilst us privileged folk in this room today surge ahead with conversations on the metaverse, on generative AI, the Internet of Things, and blockchain. Half the world is still waiting for their chance at a computer. Half the world is still waiting for my 2003 moment. They're still left behind. Digital innovation moves fast, but digital inclusion lags far behind. And while digital inclusion may have stalled, digital exclusion has only become worse, because the digital tools that I used in 2003, they were a bit of a novelty, they were a bit of an oddity. But the digital tools that we all use every day in 2023 have become ubiquitous. They're indispensable to our life and the human condition. Being digitally excluded today does not simply mean missing out on opportunities. It actually means being denied citizenship to a digital world, a digital life sphere across which so much of that human experience transpires today. And every year that passes, the venue for more and more of our everyday tasks shifts to digital platforms, meaning digital disadvantage that those 3 billion people experience every day, it only becomes more damaging for their time on Earth. It's little wonder, while my organisation gets at least 5 people reaching out every single day for a digital device. In fact, while I was in the audience listening to Sharina, 2 more people came forward and said, my child needs a laptop. So how on earth do we fix this then? Because I'm not in the business of coming here all the way to Thailand 2 days before my wedding and just throwing problems at you. There's a solution. How do we overcome the scourge of device poverty affecting 3 billion people daily? Or remember how I said that 1 million Australian students do not have a laptop at home to study with? Well, this one's going to shock you, but it's good news afterwards, don't worry. In Australia, 500 million digital devices are thrown away every year. Just take a moment to read that again. 500 million digital devices are thrown away every year, the bulk of which are perfectly functional, but have simply been replaced by wealthy corporates as the latest model comes out. Now they're sitting crushed up and rotting in landfills all across our country. 500,000 devices just like this one in front of you here. It gets worse. Now, every second, the world throws away the equivalent of 800 laptops. Once again, laptops just like this, 800 every single second. Now, I'm not all that great with mental arithmetic, but I'm just going to try. This is not in my script, but I reckon if we had to wait every single second, if we were able to somehow capture all of that, I'd say within a couple of hours, we could solve the digital divide in Papua New Guinea just like that. A digital divide which will probably take me and many others a generation to solve. Digital innovation has moved so fast that we're yet to work out how to make access to these tools universal and disposal of them sustainable. So not only do we have this enormous digital divide, keeping people from opportunities and possibilities, we are literally throwing away the tools we need to solve it. 6 years ago, did someone just laugh at my haircut then? Don't worry, I did too when I was putting it together. But 6 years ago, I sat right here in the UNSCAP hall at the 2017 USLS, and ever since that day, I've been on a mission to change this problem. Ladies and gentlemen, delegates from 56 countries and fellow members of a generation of changemakers, I would like to now shift the focus away from the alarming to the inspiring, from the problem to the solution, from the 94% of Papua New Guinean students who do not have access to a digital device to the 6% who do. That day at the USLS, I got to hear from some extraordinary change makers, and I'm pleased to say that many of whom are present on this year's agenda as well. Do not be late to Geraldine Cox's speech tomorrow. It's my biggest bit of advice for your experience at the USLS. She is extraordinary. But you know, Geraldine and the other speakers, they inspired me to do something for the betterment of the world. I felt it. I got that feeling that I hope all of you are going to feel over the next couple of days. But probably just like you, and judging from the questions that I heard earlier, I wasn't sure what. I mean, I was 20 years of age from Townsville. As a concreter when I came here, a concreter. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how. But from that moment on, I was sure that I wanted to devote my life to the service of humanity. And without even knowing what it looked like, I gave it a name so that it felt more real. It wasn't anything. It was just an idea in my head, a thought that maybe I could do something to help the world. So I wrote it down. I wrote it down in this notebook right here. On the 4th page, it says LiteHaus. I had no idea what was to come at all. Once again, it made it real. So the most valuable tool that you have in front of you, there's not your phone, it's not Instagram, it's not Facebook on this occasion. It is a pencil and a pen and a bit of paper to write your ideas down as they come into your head. Mine came to life, and as I go through and share my story, I want you to remember this guy on screen. I want you to remember who sat in your chair, most likely with far less talent than you, and certainly with a far worse haircut. Now, this is where it gets exciting. 1 month after the USLS, I had the opportunity to visit the remote Western Highlands province of Papua New Guinea for my honours thesis, which was focused on barriers to human development in these communities. Now, I'd visited PNG once before. From now on, I'm going to call it PNG. I'd visited once before and I fell in love with the place. It's the most extraordinary country. It really is. By the time I sat at the USLS, 11 months later, PNG was fresh in my mind. I'd fallen in love with the culture for self-development and the tenacity of the people to overcome barriers to their development. Now remember, PNG is one of the least developed countries on the planet. And while the profound sense of community and family and connection to the environment makes for a happy society, systemic corruption, diabolical infrastructure, and the effect of remoteness has impoverished most of the population, many of whom are my friends. While I was there in 2017, I walked on foot and surveyed over 400 village households on their experiences accessing education, healthcare, and employment opportunities. During that time, I also had the opportunity to visit the Kuta Primary School. Now, the school is very remote, and some students walk up to 3 hours barefoot across mountainous terrain, sometimes in the rain, to get there every single day. But this didn't surprise me. What did surprise me is that when they arrived, the students had a learning environment which was similar to what I had growing up in Australia in 2003. The classroom was sturdy. There were tables, chairs, blackboards, chalk, books, pens, paper, teachers, you name it. And there was something lacking for this to truly be a quality education in today's world. And that something was technology. There was not a single one of these throughout the classroom, not in the library, not anywhere in the school, could you find a computer for the students or even the teachers to use. No access to online encyclopedias to learn about the world around them. And at that moment, in that classroom, I thought to myself, how can this be a quality education if it's not a digital education in today's world? And that was my first thought. The second and third one, this is where I started to get into trouble, and this is why I'm still here. My second thought was, I can do something about this. I can change this. Because under my arm at the time was a white Lenovo laptop, similar to this one. My third thought was, I cannot accept this. I cannot accept that if I walk out that door today, continue on my merry way through my life, that these students, these children, through no fault of their own, simply circumstances of their birth, be robbed of the opportunity to be a part of the digital world. I could not accept that. I simply could not look the other way. So on September the 16th, 2017, I donated my own personal laptop to the Kuta Primary School. Now, I got a bit excited, I won't lie, in front of some media who were there covering another story. It had nothing to do with me, but they heard that I was doing something interesting. And so suddenly they come up and they put all these cameras in my face and they say, so what's next? What are you doing? What are you doing? And I got excited. And I thought, well, let's make this interesting. So I promised to come back and build an entire digital classroom for those children to have access to the digital world just like I did in 2003. 2 days later, I was at the airport flying home, and on page 3 of the national newspaper, which has a readership of about 1 million Papua New Guineans, decided to display this picture of me on page 3 with a big title up the front there that says, Aussie student promises 12 more laptops to a school. And I thought to myself, wow, I've really got to follow through with this now, because if I don't, I'm going to have a country coming after me. Now, the next day, I formed LiteHaus International to fulfill that promise of one computer lab to one school. Now, fundraising began, in my world, with asking my best mate. We were at a bar one night, and I said, I got this idea, and I want to get it started. That gentleman's just on the right of screen there, and he decided to hand over 20 Australian dollars. Just $20 to get me started. That was my seed funding. And funnily enough, because I know this is being recorded, and I know he'll be listening, so allow me a slight indulgence. It's the last dollar I ever got off him for the cause. So let's hope he can improve on that. In those early days, though, you ask how these things start. How does someone get to do all this and go along on this journey? Well, you know what? It was bloody hard work. We manufactured ways to carve out funds to support our dream, including this man on screen, Luke. He did a great job, even if he didn't put his hand in his pocket again, because every Saturday morning we used to go out and recycle scrap steel. Scrap steel, so steel that was no longer useful anymore, cans and bottles like the ones on the tables. In Australia, you can get money for recycling those. So we did, because no one else was going to give us money. I mean, look at us. We raffled prizes at local pubs and clubs on the weekends. We just found a way. We found volunteers. We formed a board. We held meetings in my parents' garage. We collected computer parts. We rebuilt them, salvaging laptops that would otherwise have gone into landfill. And let me tell you, that was a learning experience for me, because I didn't come from a tech background. I was a concreter. So we had to learn lots of things there. We even made our own company shirts. We sewed those little yellow badges on the left-hand chest of my shirt there. We built our own website. To be honest, we just faked it until we made it, and we did whatever it took to deliver that first computer lab. 6 months later, I was standing at the airport with the heaviest bag of all time, and that includes Chloe's suitcase with all of her wedding makeup and things in there, let me tell you. The heaviest suitcase of all time. 12 laptops jammed into this bag. I mean, I've subsequently learned you can't take that many lithium batteries on a plane, but no one was stopping me that day, But I rocked up to the airport and I had this suitcase that was unliftable. It would have been about 45 kilos, and I was wearing I'd painted LiteHaus on a $2 shirt. I only had 3 shirts, so I couldn't sweat in them. I had to be nice and neat. This just had to go well. Oh, it didn't. It didn't go well at all. I went to the check-in line for Qantas, and the lady looked at me and just said, that's not happening. But you know what? It did happen, because I ran over to the domestic terminal. I bought a Victoria's Secret bag, of all things, a designer bag, and I brought it back. We moved some things around, and next thing you know, our laptops are on the plane. I won't even go there with how we got through customs, but we got there, We got there. We made it happen. And 6 months later, there I stood, back at the Kuta Primary School, with 12 laptops and a pair of scissors to open what I did not know at the time would be the first functional computer lab of any of the 3,500 primary schools in the whole country. Once we'd done that, I stood there with my great mate Peter Rhyme, who's on the left of that image and still remains our country director today. I stood there with him, and we said to each other, well, what do we do now? We couldn't stop there, because he'd told me that this was a problem right across the province and right across the country. So we stood up there on a hill, and we set ourselves a goal. We set ourselves a goal of one day reaching every school with electricity in the Western Highlands province. There's about 75 schools with those preconditions. It seemed ridiculous at the time. I mean, like I say again, just look at us, We're amateurs there. And there are at least 70 or 80 of these dotted around the provinces. How on earth are we going to get that many laptops? Well, without giving away too much of a spoiler for the rest of my speech, we achieved that earlier this year. And our work has now expanded to 12 more provinces throughout that country and beyond its borders as well. But at that moment, back in 2017, we really were just a dream. We were based in Mum and Dad's garage. I worked full-time in other jobs to pay my bills for 3 years. 3 years, not a cent coming my way. I actually gave about $10,000, which is a lot of money for me then because I didn't earn enough to be doing that. But I invested, I worked full-time, and I grew LiteHaus after hours and grinded away at that big dream that I had. And you know, slowly but surely, as we delivered lab after lab after lab, people started to pay attention. And as the years went on, through sheer persistence and momentum, our capacity to deliver impact began to balloon across continents. And you know, along the way, there were game-changing moments. You know, like when you watch those movies and documentaries about startups where there's just that moment and everything clicks, you know. You know, we had one of those moments. Chloe and I were sitting on the floor of my apartment, and I just decided to go full-time with this. I just decided to quit my job, which was a good job, and go and take on this dream. But there was just one problem with that. How on earth am I going to pay myself? Because we only had $10,000 in the bank. I couldn't pay myself off of that. And I stood there and sat on the floor, and Chloe remembers this well. I just remember looking up at the heavens and going, when is somebody going to listen to me? When is somebody going to give me that chance? Now, I don't belong to a faith, but certainly my prayer was answered because somebody came along and said, I know what you can do. I've seen what you can do, and I want to help take it to another level. And they donated 100,000 Australian dollars for me to get started and do it properly. And so off we went. But you know, ultimately, I want you to remember this, that it wasn't those moments that made this journey possible. It wasn't those moments that defined the LiteHaus journey. What it was all the moments in between. The hard yakka, as we call it in Australia. The hard work. The refusal to give up. The having to go on your Saturday mornings and recycle cans and bottles. The impact which we've created, which I will share with you today, has been the result of relentless hard work and an unwavering belief that a better, more inclusive world is possible. So fast forward to today, and this is what one promise has been able to achieve. From that first laptop back in 2017, we've successfully collected, refurbished, and repurposed almost 9,000 devices for students in need. If we placed one of these at each desk and on every chair in this hall, we could fill it 18 times over. Now, 5,000 of these laptops and desktops now sit in 195 school computer labs. 195 across Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, and the Solomon Islands, making digital learning a reality for 130,000 students and these nations' future leaders. For them, the devices have made more than 715,000 hours of digital usage possible. Hours laden with creativity, learning, networking, and entertainment. Because in addition to these devices, we also provide access to an offline e-library called UNet, developed by an amazing change maker called David Valentine. Now this box, this UNet box, it contains 6.2 million educational articles, fits in the palm of my hand, and it does not even need internet to be accessed. So you can go out to the farthest, remotest corner of Papua New Guinea, perhaps Prairie River in the Gulf province. You can go where Wi-Fi and 4G is about 200 kilometers away from reaching communities. And you can sit there with kids on the side of a river with a laptop and talk to them and show them their favorite animals, their favorite countries, and things that otherwise would have forever remained a dream for them. And I got to do that about 2 months ago. This is transformational for students whose school libraries lack even basic learning materials. Now, to make all this possible, you'll remember our good friend Wakes, he donated $20. Well, now we've managed to raise $4.5 million, converting all of it, almost all of it, into social value injected back into the 288 communities with which we have served. Along the way, our work has also had a considerable environmental impact too, by reducing e-waste in landfill. We've refurbished or sustainably recycled 140 tonnes of e-waste. That's about the size and weight of a blue whale. Now, with over 30 chemicals and metals crammed into every computer, e-waste is terribly degrading to the environment and leaves a significant carbon footprint when irresponsibly disposed of. So don't throw your computer away. Send me a message on LinkedIn and said, please. Because one device can release 28 kilograms of CO2 throughout the disposal process. So we've managed to prevent the release of 290 tonnes of CO2. This is the equivalent of what planting 14,500 trees would do over the space of a year. And it just goes to show what the resident coordinator of the UN was referring to earlier, that the SDGs are interconnected. I heard so many questions and so many anxieties earlier in the questions about, I'm worried, I don't know how to make an impact. What do I do first? Start. Because you just don't know what you can do. Oh, when I set out to do this journey, I didn't even know what CO2 was. So you can't possibly know what you're going to be able to achieve. And the best things happen along the way. Ultimately, at LiteHaus International, we're driven by a firm belief that quality education can only be a digital education in today's world. We refuse to accept a world of inequality where some simply do not get to dream. A world where billions of people are kept apart from opportunity, kept apart from realizing their dreams by an ever-growing digital divide. A digital world where postcodes determine participation. Instead, we seek and we're creating a future defined by equity of access and opportunity. Our dream is to create a digitally empowered world where everyone holds in their hands the tools of opportunity and where there are no barriers to dreams. Every 48 hours, we build a new classroom, digital classroom, somewhere else in the world. Now, so far, I've shared with you a lot of numbers. I'm not a big fan of numbers, despite what that looks like. Because, here's the thing. You cannot hope to measure or capture with measly numbers something as beautiful, raw, and human as impact. When you deliver impact, you deliver hope, inspiration, happiness, belief, dignity, freedom, even salvation. And at the risk of irking an academic or two, good luck capturing that wholly and neatly in a metric or a framework. You don't measure impact. You feel it. You feel it. And today, I'm going to share with you some stories that are my favorites, stories that have made me feel the impact that I'm creating. Now, the first one begins where change should too, close to home. Remember how I told you that 25% of all Australian students do not own a laptop at home? Well, I'll go a step further. Unfortunately, digital exclusion cuts even deeper across racial and regional lines. First Nations people and those coming from refugee migrant backgrounds are hit hardest by device poverty. In many remote Indigenous communities in Australia, the digital device ownership rate plummets to less than 5%. That means in a football team of, say, 20 people, our football in Australia, one student at that school would own a laptop, just one. There's one particular school in remote far north Queensland where out of a secondary cohort of 194 students, only 2 had a digital device when I first met them, 2. So to the Australians in the audience, we look so far abroad for change. Our country has to change too. When I visited that school in 2020, I handed over a laptop to the school captain, who was one of 70 students who received a device that day. Now this student, I can't use names in this, but is an extraordinary, talented student. The school captain, he was top of every grade, ducks of every class, an amazing guy. But when his guidance counsellor would ask him where he saw his career taking him, what he wanted to do when he was older, he would say, maybe I could be a mechanic, or, there's a bakery down the road, maybe I could work there, or my uncle owns a service station, perhaps I could start by working there. For all of his talents, for all of his abilities, he deserves to be in the room here today. But his horizons, were no further than the main street of his country town. But owning a digital device, it transformed his view of the world and what was possible for his life. He Googled university the night that he got his laptop, and he applied online a few days later. 3 years later, and he is on the verge of graduating with an electrical engineering degree. Once again, just because that's easy to do, top of every class there as well. And he also has passed his device on to his sister. He doesn't need it anymore because through his degree, he not only learned how to use one of these, he learned how to build one. And now he's got his own one that he's built. Now, every 3 hours, LiteHaus International provides a student in Australia with their own digital device. Now, whether it be African refugee migrant students living in my hometown, learning English from scratch by watching Congolese movies with English subtitles on YouTube, or how about a young woman continuing her schooling remotely from hospital, 1,400 kilometres away from her hometown while battling bone cancer? How about 15-year-olds in regional towns running online businesses, or blind children learning through audio aids and screen readers? I could go on all day, but the 3,800 devices we've distributed across Australia have had a profound impact and are in remarkable hands. And before I move on, just another story that's come to me. We're all familiar with the war in Russia and in Ukraine. In Australia, we've had a couple of thousand Ukrainian families come to us looking for a home, looking for asylum, whilst that horrible and evil war takes place. And I've had the privilege of meeting 115 families with school-aged children across our state that are Ukrainian refugees. Now, when they arrived, they had to leave so quickly. On their way to Australia, they lost everything. In fact, some people had a laptop, but had it stolen on the journey over here. And so suddenly, through all of this upheaval, these families, they've got to send their kids to school. And in Australia, despite the horrific facts that I've named today, the expectation is that those students will have a laptop. Well, this wasn't a reality for those students. One family in particular, I'll share their story. A mum and a dad and 8 children. 8 children learning every night, completing their homework on an iPhone. Mum's iPhone, dad's iPhone in 2023. And so the kids are the ones that love our work the most, but let me tell you, those were 2 very relieved parents when we dropped off 8 laptops to their doorstep. And the parents said to me, this is going to be amazing for the kids, but at least we get our iPhones back as well at night. But the second story I would like to share, and the rest of my speech actually takes place in the incredible nation and civilization of Papua New Guinea. Now, on this particular day, Chloe and I were in the back of a Land Cruiser in Chimbu province, right up in the highlands, and we were coming towards the end of a long day. We completed 4 primary school computer labs in one day. And we were driving past, and the 4th one rang us up and said, we've got a bit of a surprise for you. We really want you to come along. Well, they definitely undersold the surprise part of it, that's for sure. Because when we pulled up, there were over 1,500 community members dressed in the most incredible traditional outfits, beating drums. They'd been there all day to surprise us, to thank us for what we were doing for their school. So you can imagine, as we drove into the school, Chloe and I are in the back of the car, we're quiet, we're a bit exhausted after a big day, and then suddenly, pandemonium, people everywhere, kids running up to me at the car, jostling, dancing, people celebrating, the magic, the colours of PNG, people as far as the eye could see. And so we got out of the car, and they formed this tunnel, and for the next 3 minutes, we jostled our way through the crowd, and we got up onto the stage, and the heart is just racing. And we're about to snip the ribbon at our 40th digital classroom. I climbed up onto the stage, and I saw a sea of smiles and happiness everywhere you looked. It was just unbridled joy. I'm struggling to capture it here, but it was absolutely incredible. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, there came a deep, howling cry. From behind me, I felt a woman grasp me like this. And I realized that this was a mother's cry. A mother weeping not out of anguish, but out of sheer joy, relief, and gratitude that her children who attended that school would grow up with something that she'd never had herself. The opportunity to be a part of something bigger. The opportunity to dream. On that day, I was opportunity to her, and she was not letting me go. Now, for at least 20 minutes, she was inconsolable. She was overwhelmed with the potential for learning which now sat at her children's fingertips. And it's always fascinated me that it is those who have never used a computer before who seem to best understand and appreciate its possibilities. If you ever wanted to know what digital access can do for somebody's life, don't ask me. Don't ask a person doing a TED Talk, tech innovator, no. Speak to that mother up there who every single day is breaking her back to give her children a chance to be something more. She knows, and she knew that day, and it stayed with me forever. Now, you know that they say that mum is always right. Well, they are. This mother was spot on. Those computers have changed the learning journeys of her children and their classmates. I have seen it with my own eyes. I've visited more than 200 under-resourced schools on this journey, but few have been as poorly resourced as the Cunabao Primary School where I met her. When I first visited, I was struck by the almost universal lack of modern learning materials or inspiring content. The shelves held ragged, outdated books covering obscure topics from the colonial era, including our little friends from 2003, random phone books. I mean, what are children going to learn from old Australian phone books? Encyclopedia collections were incomplete, and having been published in 1978, these books were still naming Jimmy Carter as the US president. Now, who knows who Jimmy Carter is? Hands up. All right. For those who don't, including Chloe when I did the dress rehearsal last night in the hotel, let's just have a bit of a look at that and see how old these encyclopedias were. Jimmy Carter was the US president before Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, 2 George Bushes, and Ronald Reagan. So a long time ago. But that was the reality of the learning environment and the history lessons being bestowed on those students. A world map on the wall was that old that it featured the USSR and Yugoslavia. This environment cannot hope to offer the quality education which Sustainable Development Goal 4 aspires to. Expecting children to learn or to read in this environment without books and resources is like asking a marathon runner to train in a telephone box. A child's brain is a sponge. If there is no water to drench it in, it will remain brittle and dry. And when I first visited Cunabao, it appeared gripped by a long, harsh drought. This second picture in the middle of the screen is one of my favourites, and it was from my most recent trip to Papua New Guinea and the Cunabao Primary School. 8 months after we completed that digital classroom, 8 months after that dear mother held me with all the desperate hope that she could muster, I was astonished to find that the teachers had managed to integrate the use of computers and the offline e-library into every subject that they taught. They deserve the credit for that, not me. I bought the infrastructure. They created the impact. I sat in the computer lab and watched as 21 students, including this lovely girl here, used the devices seamlessly for their assignments. The social sciences students were researching history and anthropology, flicking through a complete encyclopedia, not written 50 years ago, but rather Wikipedia, humanity's most comprehensive assembly of knowledge of all time. Mathematics students were learning fractions and algebra through interactive modules and videos relevant to their age and ability. And English students were typing up stories about their parents' lives and their experience growing up as subsistence farmers. Their stories now captured forever in digital. So it's little wonder that teachers not only at Cunabao but right across the province, in Anigal School, Gon Primary, Pranorka Primary, Kawi and Aviant Primary Schools, universally reported growth in students' capability but also their confidence. They regard it as the most valuable resource found in the school today. And remember, what I saw at Cunabao that day is a daily occurrence at 195 schools across the world. Now, that's not too bad for someone that sat in the USLS halls just like you. Just goes to show what is possible. Now, best of all, every student in that room, including the children of the crying mother I mentioned before, had gone through our self-guided digital skills training first to even be in a position to navigate those encyclopedias and learning materials. It is these digital skills that are the primary legacy that we're leaving to these children, because it is their passport for success as they live and work well into the 2070s. Now, if we live in a world where technology is ubiquitous to the human condition, imagine in 5 decades' time just how prevalent the digital world will be. And 12 months post-installation, every child at that school, including the children of that crying mother, children living with disabilities who are too often swept aside in the pursuit of education, had the opportunity to begin their own digital learning journey. Every 48 hours, we give that gift to another school somewhere in the world. Now, we've empowered over 130,000 students with digital learning tools and opportunities since 2017. It's a big number. It's a big number. But I've got just one more story for you. Just one more story. On the right-hand side of that screen, just have a look at that student there. What captivates you about that student? For me, it's his eyes. I mean, his eyes are looking through that computer like it's a portal to another world, because it is. I met him in 2019, and he was one of 4 students that I sat next to for their very first interaction with a computer. Now, as you can imagine, in those early days, the kids are just wide-eyed and bamboozled by it all. For most of them, excitement contends with astonishment, and not a lot of progress is made. Most of them struggle to write their own name. But as I turned to my right, I noticed that this one boy had written an entire paragraph with capital letters and perfect punctuation. Within 15 minutes of having ever used a computer, he was able to achieve what took me, that grade 1 student, years to master. We must change the world. I'm going to skip ahead in my speech here a bit because I want to have some questions before we wrap up. We must change the world. And it's daily my privilege to live the dream that I had at the USLS in 2017 and drive a vehicle for social change. The why is my fuel, and these stories are our why. They remind me that on days of doubt and despair, that the digital world and all the opportunity it brings would have remained beyond the reach of 130,000 people if it was not for me and my decision to act. So let me ask you this. Who is going to change the world? If not us, then who? I'm marrying my beautiful wife-to-be, Chloe, next week, and we hope to bring life into the world before long. But now you see that all the UN climate emergency projections tend to end at 2100. Now, Chloe and I will be 103 when that happens, so we might not make it, to be honest with you, but our children will live to see that day. Our children will live to see the 2.5 degrees Celsius increase in global temperatures and the loss of entire island nations such as Tuvalu to rising sea levels if our generation does not right the ship. At present, the status quo for our world, the trajectory we are currently on, is a concoction of a less hospitable planet, a diminished quality of life, significant displacement and deeper divisions between us, and that should all shock us into fear and into action. We cannot accept this status quo, just as I refused to accept the status quo of digital exclusion that day I handed over the very first laptop. So I ask you, delegates of the USLS, will we turn the other way to social and environmental challenges? Will we toss them to our children to grapple with even greater time constraints? Or will we step up and stare between the eyes the great challenges of climate change, rising inequalities, and adapting to life with artificial intelligence? We do not need a why to change the world. After all, when faced with this potentially grim future, we do not have a choice. So we don't need a why, but we certainly do need a how. Solutions to the greatest challenges of our species' existence cannot be distilled down into one-liners, no matter how hard populist conservatives on the election trail may try. Fighting climate change and rebalancing intergenerational inequalities are planet and people-wide challenges. But I do believe that whether the challenge is to bridge the digital divide, achieve gender equality, to raise life expectancy, or save the planet, there's one underlying precondition which must be achieved. And the good thing is, each of us in the room can do something about it. We need a world of net producers, not net consumers. We need to create a surplus of social good, a critical mass of net producers which can tip the scale and change the course of history. Now, to be clear, each and every one of us is a consumer. We can't possibly be a zero consumer. In fact, it alarms me that I burnt 700 kilograms of carbon emissions to fly here to be with you today. That's my consumption. But on this hand, I've also managed to save 300 tons of emissions from entering the world's atmosphere. Equally, I've lent on the support and help of many thousands of people. But in turn, I've helped over 100,000 people. The last thing I'm suggesting is that we need all 500 of you in the room today to start an NGO. No. We need brave and ethical innovators and business leaders. We need honest politicians. We need talented engineers, caring doctors, and well-principled parents and teachers. But what I am insisting on is that our planet, our species, and its future demands of you that you give more than you get and you leave a net positive effect on the world in which you live in. We, the living, are the generation of unrivaled opportunities, but we're also the generation of unrivaled obligation. We must relish the challenges that stand before us and act. 2023 is the midpoint for the Sustainable Development Goals. They are ours to champion. And if we manage to become the first net productive or net positive generation of all time, we will have turned the tide. We will have changed the world. But how? How can us mere mortals, us university students and recent graduates, rise to this challenge, the greatest challenge in human history? I know what it is like to feel small and overwhelmed by the scale of the challenges and the scale of the world. But I too have sat in your chair in this hall. I wrote in your notebooks. I had your dreams. I had your ambitions. I felt your stresses, your worries, and your anxieties. I had your doubts. I was where you were just 6 years ago today, and by Christmas, I will have been able to haul 200,000 people out of digital inequality. All from one laptop, all from one moment, not accepting a problem. So do not, for a second, lose hope in the face of the unprecedented scale of global challenges that we face. Because remember, whilst these challenges may be unprecedented, we are also unprecedentedly educated, resourced, capable, and connected. Do not let people tell you something is not possible, they're wrong. As youth, our greatest value proposition we can offer the world is our natural optimism, our tendency to challenge prevailing norms, our belief in our future, our crazy ideas. We need you to dream. We need you to hope. We need you to inspire. We need you not to be worried and encumbered with fears or the fear of inaction or not getting something done. Or what if this or what if that? Just do. And I hope that on your journey of doing and on your social impact journey, I've offered some kindling for your minds today. I hope my story can help you believe that changing the world can be done and that it simply must be done. My fellow future leaders and change makers, it's been an absolute privilege to speak with you all today. Thank you so much for your attention. It's a long time, over 45 minutes. But I wish you every success. I wish you every success on your journeys, wherever they may be and wherever they look like. And I look forward to working with all of you to leave behind a net positive world to our children. We are the generation of opportunity and obligation. It is time for us to lead. Thank you.